hair tie.
Can you?
I need it. Unless somebody else doesn't use.
Sorry, that's some of my hair. Let me know when y'all are ready.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Then go for it.
In the United States should establish single-payer national health insurance in the United States. Lack of health care coverage creates a widening gap in health quality that results in disparate access, system giving and death gaps. Hamilton all in 17. The system that's often inequality by delivering high-quality care to all unequal access, likely to contribute to disparities in health status. Many cannot afford care, and for ill care altogether, 90% of non-elderly adults in the USA receive prescriptions in 2014 cannot afford to fill them. Millions have been bankrupted by illnesses and medical bills. The disparities in access are due to high rates of uninsurance. The uninsured are far more likely to forego needed medical visits, free test treatments, and medication. 30% do not have a primary care provider. For poor Americans, getting insurance boosts access care, leading to more visits for preventive screenings. Although Medicaid improves access, specialist care is often unattainable. Physicians are free to turn away Medicaid patients. Care program might increase downstream health problems. People with inadequate insurance are risk financial harm when they receive services and are less likely to obtain needed care. Increased qualities and from improved access to care. Uninsured were 38% more likely to delay seeking emergency care. The uninsured patients are at a higher risk of receiving substandard medical care. Small hospitals appear to deliver lower quality of care. Lower quality of care measured by personal care. Messing poor Americans are also far less likely to receive recommended influenza and pneumonia vaccines and cancer screening. Quality of care is worse for racial and ethnic minorities, although racial disparities and quality of hospital care could have narrowed between 2005 and 2010 as a result of improvements among hospitals serving patients from minority backgrounds and most more equitable care within hospitals. Unequal access to care along with institutional racism remain important drivers of disparities among non-elderly adults with cancer. More than a third abroad or when new data financial catastrophe appears to increase mortality for treatable cancer. Medical bills force families to make difficult choices. 34% weren't able to pay for food, heat, or housing. 15% took out high interest loans. 42% took on extra jobs. The ACA facilitates the insurance industry's profit maximization and devolves financing and health management to the private sector. Waits in 16, the ACA has strengthened for-profit insurance by transferring public tax revenues to the private sector. The abundant data substantiates the failure of Obamacare has become nearly inevitable. More than one half of the uninsured population will remain uninsured. At least 27 million people due to high deductibles and co-pays. Coverage has become unusable administrative expenditure to pay for exorbitant salaries for executive profits and dividends. For shareholders, these initiatives facilitate the efforts of for-profit insurance corporations who collect premiums for government agencies and invest at high rates of return. Insurance corporations profited by denying or delaying unnecessary care. The South proposals offer multiple competing for-profit private insurance corporation programs previously based in the public sector were privatized. Insurance executives made decisions about services their authority superseding physician. Obamacare enhanced the fortune of the private insurance industry. The neoliberal health agenda emerges a worldwide agenda developed by the World Bank, IMF, and other financial institutions. This agenda to promote market-driven healthcare facilitated MNCs access to public health, public sector health and social security trust funds. Managerial ideology claim without evidence that corporate executives can achieve superior quality and efficiency by managing medical services in the market that locks in inequality, poverty, and ecologically mediated violence from coin 70. And the number of people living in extreme poverty has been extreme poverty is more than half since 2001. 71% of the world's population lives below the income line. Poverty has been growing across the world. Prevalence of global poverty is largely a consequence of the inequitable distribution of resources. It's calling for a more critical perspective the challenges of those narratives and what the elites have been paying the ability of the majority for to enjoy the theoretical benefits. The expansion of democratic elections may eventually fail if we neglect the social and environmental degradation, calls for more urgent recognition of the climate change, ecological degradation, global warming, presenting existential threat. Many of us live beyond our fair share of the planet's capacity and do not yet see ecology and immediate structural balance. Ecological permanent health must no longer be a minority itch, and the vision of global health requires a broader knowledge-based skill set. The only governing rules have created or accelerated environmental power need to be assessed politically in terms of transforming, redistributing power, wealth, adequate systemic change, and by policy and legislation. Single-payer healthcare is the most effective method to increase health insurance coverage or reduce death gaps. Ansel and Tiffany, the most elegant, comprehensive, fairest, and lowest cost solution before Medicare. 48% of Americans had no insurance. Now only 2% are uninsured. The satisfaction with coverage is substantially higher. The costs are substantially lower. If one wanted to solve the problem, the uninsured and reduce death gaps, the expansion of Medicare would have been the most logical. Healthcare is right. Healthcare is mandated. The solution of healthcare is right. Universal healthcare is an entitlement that should be the same for all citizens. If a mandate healthcare is a commodity to be bought and sold, then the idea system of insurance are markedly different. Has further hardwired inequity into the law. The collusion between Congress, corporate health insurance, and big pharma really a more equitable and lower cost solution. There are three major structural flaws which could be solved by a single payer health system. A single payer system. Insurance expansion is neither universal nor equitable. States above millions uninsured. These states account for over half of the poor uninsured black single mothers and uninsured poor working poor. It is as if Obamacare was never enacted, accentuating the legacy of structural racism. Premiums, co-pays, and deductibles for private health insurance are prohibitively high for the working poor. This limits choice. It was a sweet deal for the insurance companies. Under a single payer health care system, there would be no co-pays or deductibles. Embracing research methods that contextualize realize larger goals of healthcare policy, in particular battles as key insistence on overarching theoretical methods stifles research's critical potential. The absent discussion solves and spills over battle against having equality of researchers values methods as more progressive. They are not methods are tools and techniques. The practical steps necessary to accomplish research and understand methods are intrinsically progressive as akin to light bulbs, not the electric current or the source of political health equity research stands electricity. Any research approach can be used for progressive ends or reactionary ones. Researchers can approximate reality but not capture. Researchers who conduct qualitative health disparities research lack consciousness about their own epistemological mores. HIV prevention research focus on black heterosexual men studies that centers experiences and narratives are surprisingly rare. We examine how low-income black heterosexual men construct safer sex and masculinity in their discourses about relationships, as well as how broader external public dialogue shape everyday talk. That we highlight how discourse about blame more than women aligned with discourse that position black heterosexual women. Interpretation provides a key illustration of how critical health equity research paired with qualitative methods can advance new knowledge rather than reinforce negative stereotypes or pathologize how black men spoke about women are frames, highlighting that factors beyond the level of the individual may shape discourse and health equity research devoid of a critical epistemological stance. Practice risk examining the same fruits and social structural inequity, adherence to conventional epistemologies, clinging to theoretical frameworks to reflect the ignorance that thwart the ability to research, bring out genuine change, grassroots mobilization, political advocacy, engagement of community stakeholders and research participants, targeting policymakers are all critical steps to effect genuine change in health equity. Must defy root causes of health inequity, utilize critical theoretical frameworks, and commit to practice critical practice and political engagement. The plan challenges corporate profits and takes power from pharma and insurance companies. Over in 70, the doctor-patient relationship is a one-on-one interaction. The external influence compels the doctor to prescribe a particular state or implant, and certainty in medical decision-making will be taken. Doctors do not think they are influenced by anything. More testing means more false positives. False positives send a patient to a cardiac cath lab and patient experience arrhythmia, heart attack, stroke, bleeding, anaphylaxis, or death. Companies invest in the medical community because it pays the areas that found themselves getting paid more for the same care. There's a percent increase in services. Decision can be swayed by money, even consciously. The medical profession has to flatly forbid for-profit companies from medical and clinical care. The conflict raised by fee for services trickier. Most effective would be to eliminate financial incentive to have physicians be paid a salary rather than procedures. That conflict would be the fact that access and tied to insurance. Insurers hold up personal insurance, the most powerful influence on how doctors care for patients. Most patients can't get to doctors if they don't have insurance. If they do, the more coverage they have, the more care they get. There's only one ethical option: universal health care. Getting cut from insurance means getting cut off from medical care. The conflict can't get more manifest. If we want the public to believe our commitment is our highest priority, we need to take the lead in combating the forces that threaten this. Reject industry money, and the alternative to single payer is more private control that makes care ineffective morally. 15 when Daraprim, a 62-year-old elixing drug decided to ace region 1350 and a 750 region suit. Attorney CEO is trying to do his job to make a profit. The villainous the system. The Americans overpay where every aspect of healthcare efficiently plays no role in rewarding providers. The power in setting the price reductions skewed toward manufacturing. Consumers lack awareness of actual medication pricing and present to keep them under control. The cost of bringing a drug into the market are higher because of marketing expenses. The U.S. is one of the only two countries that allow direct-to-consumer ads. Colin is calling up golden policymakers to prioritize pro-poor pathway to coverage. Having a public entity rather than private capital is the better option. The system that doesn't work for reforms of American terms of health, such as life expectancy, infant mortality rates, and maternal deaths, or nationalized healthcare facilities, community care, private insurance companies create communal divides based on profit, and dilute the quality of care. Shove it all in 94. The prevention means looking beyond treatment and community based on public health efforts. Private insurance attaches funding to individual patients. It separates funding from broader societal interests, fragmenting the community, places sick people and social causes of death outside the boundaries of medical care. Preventive measures that increase cost of financing should facilitate problem solving at the community level. Enduring changes result in community-wide changes. Schools that teach a point mean a deficiency in a health department that can guarantee clean air and water, capitation payments, and convening providers practice of the community, and make community-based interventions more difficult because no providers or population-based purview. Private insurers sought cheaper care to avoid paying bills, but rarely advocated a better quality care. Single-payer national health program provides the most effective framework for implementing quality-enhancing principles. Empirical data demonstrates the effectiveness of improving aggregate care on reducing racial disparities in the quality of medical treatment. Surveying at all in 14 between hospital and within hospital differences contribute to racial or ethnic gaps decreased over time. An initiative designed to improve overall quality should accompany efforts to address racial and ethnic disparities. Efforts to improve the overall quality of care may reduce racial and ethnic disparities. The foundation of quality improvement rests on reducing variation disparities significantly. Significant fundamental problems with quality of care because they reflect care that is not rendered. Clinical needs increasing consistently of care may accentuate unwarranted variation. Overall improvements in the quality of ambulatory care and Medicare Advantage plans were accompanied by narrowed racial disparities in quality of care. We found substantial improvements in quality of care and racial and ethnic equity during the 6 years following a public reporting initiative. Single payer is comparatively the best method for universal coverage. Gaffney in 1030. Some argue for an incremental path. The most prominent reform is a public option. It seems unlikely such a reform would bring universal coverage. A public option determines a high risk of raising premiums while subsidizing profits of insurers. Should we imposing a stiffer mandate? Absolutely not. The managed competition reforms is not deployed to affect universal coverage. Even with strict mandates, some remain uninsured or in default. Instead of a complicated patchwork, the most effective way would be to simply cover everybody through NHI. Some of you guys are enrolling everybody would entail disruption. This need not be the case. Medicare succeeded in overwhelming majority. We're enrolled in Medicare Part A. More than 90% were in Part B.
You good?
Yep.
I I guess my first question is simply, why do Black Lives Matter in the context of the 1AC?
Well, the 1AC identifies that we think that national health insurance should be provided. We think that, like,
That doesn't respond to my question. Why do Black Lives Matter in the context of the 1AC?
I'm not sure I fully understand your question. The 1AC says that people should have access to health insurance. Like,
I'm going to ask one more time, and I'm hoping for a better answer. Why do Black Lives Matter in the context of the 1AC?
I think that the 1AC says one reason that Black life and other people's lives matter is because biological death is bad. I think there are other reasons why people consider Black lives to matter, why Black lives should matter. I don't think that the 1AC is a referendum on that statement, nor should it be.
That doesn't make any sense, but okay. Himmelstein says, quote, although race-based disparities in quality are well documented, the low quality scores of doctors and hospitals serving poor communities might reflect patients' deprived social circumstances rather than their provider's performance. To that, my question then becomes, why does being poor, and I'll do your all lives matter shit for a second, why does being poor justify bad quality of care?
Sure. Well, our evidence talks about there's a profit motive from the private insurance industry to provide worse quality care to groups that are not able to provide a significant, like, monetary incentive. For example, people that have significant amount of money can pay.
But I guess I want y'all to, like, listen to, like, the logics of this. Why does being poor mean to the level of how you are treated?
Well, our evidence indicates there's not a profit motive for doctors to be serving in those communities.
That's definitely not what your evidence literally concludes that there is well documented evidence of racial disparities that exist. It concludes that it's not based off of the what might reflect deprived. You know, it says that rather than the provider's performance, it's about the social location of the patient. I'm wondering why being poor justifies poor treatment.
So I think I might be able to answer this question a little better. I think two things. One is we think that being poor is only one part of the reason why patients are treated differently.
So how many parts are there? How many parts?
I think it's very difficult to define that and answer that question because
what parts of the 1A? What is because like
doctor-patient relationships
but like
obviously
Natalie.
Yeah.
The 1AC evidence has a very singular focus on the kind of like equity of resources produces income equality means quality of care. That is the particular that the 1AC focuses on. So when you go on the 2AC and you extrapolate on all these emphatic things, I'm wondering what I can hold you down to from the text of the 1AC.
I disagree with the notion that the app says there is only one
reason
part
of the evidence?
Why care is bad.
Where in the evidence?
But I think that the app says that there is one way to confront why care is bad. That is not the only way, but it can make a tangible difference.
Okay, so then respond to my question of then why is it that not having income capital or power justifies bad forms of care?
I think there are many reasons. They're contingent.
This is such a circular response. But okay.
I'm sending out the 1AC. I want to flip next to Theo.
You judged us in the negative, you just in the negative, and you just. So the two of y'all who have not, we kind of fucked things up in terms of like order and shit. So just as a precursor, if the AF round was any indicator, that this is going to be one of those little top-down
I wasn't even going to explain all
things.
that.
I know, but I usually do because like people are like, the top, the order. That's not the thing.
Next to the app it is.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me know when everybody's ready.
I'm good, yeah.
They want to see poses a question. What does the 1AC's health insurance policy do for Anna Stanley Jones, Mikia Hutchins, Mike Brown, Rakisha McBride, and the endless list of live people positioned in the hold where death is not only an outcome but a process proceeding and exceeding their lives? A transubstantiation, lexicological order, places blackness within the infinite rest of meaning and formation that create the contrast of a subject and psyche formation they are moved. You produce a progressive policy begs a question of timing through which the media metrics of good, healthy, and recovery can be accomplished. The sickness has left the center of the body and entered the epidermal schema of the state. Sharp 2016, 7-year-old Anna Stanley Jones sleeping was murdered in 2010 by Jessica Bleakley. Despite the establishment of all facts, all charges were dropped. Unarmed, sleeping, 7 years old. Where do we make of the conjunction? Are we to approach these terms as if they make sense outside the logics of colonization, outside the logics of black life in the wake, outside the logic of being armed with blackness? Her grandmother said, I get no sleep, I'm sick as hell, I get no sleep. The flashbacks, these stories too accumulate. He did it when the archives of the present think of the second autopsy ordered by the family adopted the language of black monstrosity embedded in the language of strong arm robbery, that he was not armed to show that he was fleeing and gravely injured. How Darren Wilson's jury testimony evaluates his role as the strong arm of the law and state power falls away in the arm as the armed and trained cop is transformed by his proximity to blackness into a 5-year-old child, not productivity through the enactment of a healthy subject facilitates more insidious encouraging force of whiteness. This is a part of a capitalist form of care that marks blackness as property for the creation of the subject. Thus, the production of blackness as object is produced through the figure of the black mother. Symbolic exchange of her labor precedes violence as a material and constitutes the world. 3. Criminal presence comes close and tend the benefits occur to all our learned through the mistakes of racial lines, fertility, and learning as an active development. Commodities can fall not because they're used to this society, but because they serve as an additional exchange. Superfluid is hands of produce value without use to superfluid damage until black life can be used to while black life makes crucial perpetuation security stays aside to the black life that it can use. Is a criminal trace now it sees but precedes materiality, that which like useful in commodity sense becomes useful at aesthetic level, and black mothering is a motive for survival that redefines productivity that's dangerous because it produces survival from its criminal processing site. On perpetuation racism in the culture, the aspects of very set of production of black life, the protection of blackness, characterized, criminalized, and demonized the figure of the black mother. How black maternal figures are named critical to the unconscious, the racial, to the constituted by fantasy, repression, so that the black superfluidity, my country needs me, and if I were not here, it'd have to be embedded in the mark maternal body as crucial to fantasy, their lives have inherently different worth the intervening narrative. As a mode through which to reveal the violence and narrative of flesh they create another form, mother needs to modify square and black in order to disrupt the normative operation of mothering into a narrative patriarchal family black. Mothering has always been about the reproduction of objection and criminalization is constructed, but the start comes before the romantic is before a possibility of pathology. Struggle to foreclose and focus on the black maternal rematch, connection, accountability, and prediction of a local role. Now they understand violence as happening within a structure as contingent acts between subjects. Anti-whiteness operates on the scale of structure as a constituent of outside through which violence is enacted. Chart 2016. The violence against her is not contingent, it's gratuitous violence that occurs at the level of structure that constitutes the black as constituent of outside the forgotten space. The black ejected wasn't ejected from the system. She is the ejection and objection by on through which the system can reimagine less life, but reimagines the reconstitutes itself. The suffering of black people cannot be analogized. We are not called claimed by life in the same way. Now there's no future. The affirmative progressive narrative assumes the liberal notion of time is positively outside of violence, specifying the ways in which the live in all investments in captivity over determined possibilities of creating a future not already concealed and codified with the state to entrap blackness. Still in 2013, the state organized populations, institutions, and forms of knowledge and regulatory imagination. The disciplined vision of the state ensures that the future can be extrapolated from the present by managed to hoarding and eradicating the future before it arrives. So the abuses preemptive action before to make its imagined future primitive has when things are better now, but state and non-state violence continue to race target racialize and gender populations in the same way, but under a new name. The future is not the future that awaits us, but the present that has. We have been living progress of central discourse produced by the revolutionary state. Its level of conception of progress is named as a time that is cyclical, unfortunately forgetful progress, patient, and her former temporality. So the state to justify new race violence, it continues under the name of justice, equality, and democracy. The state declares change will come to be patient and trust in the progress of time. Is a notion of history where the passage of time washes away the violence of then and how, so that the future is free from the horse of past in this way. The past constructed the place of radical tyranny and aberration. The progress of the future sexual violence will be left behind in the progress of the revolution. Time to erase those happen, dissolving terror and violence in the progress of the future. No passively cemented into the present possessed by the logic of protocols of racial capitalism, passed by perfectly routine massacre that wasn't his repeated endlessly across time, space, and time. The post-colony prison frontier, torture room, plantation, reservation, pride zone, and not even though the captive body, flesh body has been liberated, the episode of his dynamics and naming evaluation remains grounded in the originating metaphors, captivity, and mutilation, so neither time nor history nor historiography or its topic show movement any human subject is murdered over and over again by the passions of all this and anonymous archaism. The future is not the triumph of a tendency inscribed in the present, is the place where the wreckage of then and now lives on in the domestic space of the U.S. is not a geographical location, but the temporal and spatial capacity for the human allows transcendence of a fixed location into universality. The human's rootedness in the landscape is enabled through fungible black bodies like family master settlement in their indigenous cold fashion on the detonated skin king in 2013. The process of settling the land is a process that starts before arrival, and the sure settlement allows the settler to become a human station coordinates because the name designated and the black becomes not being settled as a assemblage of technologies and processes, making body subject considered by settling time and space. The settler is able to become a stable, coherent, and autonomous human subject while they also experience hypermobility, transit the settlers, unfettered movement is predicated on fixed flexibility of back bodies, clearing solely spoken of as a non-metaphor as a verb from the human's grammatical structure. The discursive displacement represents actual displacement as the human writers are clearing static space, avoiding settler violence and absent of indigenous bodies. The settler indigenizes themselves, the original or circular indigeneity and buried itself within the land of the clearing. Black bodies are the raw material for the space that makes it possible but cannot occupy to make a place without making a home. People attempt to create order and hold things of apparent chaos of our nature. While the bodies and lands of native black forces chaos that need to be ordered, the landscapes of settlement when they appear to the eyes of eternal pasture with the log cabin concealed with violent processes hidden in the clearing. One way of revealing what is hidden is through rethinking what a landscape is and how it functions. Landscape is always in the process of becoming what is hidden. As a settlement, not just making a physical location, rather than simultaneous process of rooting in order to settler can actually become the particular body, a place, body, gender, race, object, sexuality, and launch of the universal and abstract space. Human is its spatial and temporal capacity. Is home and not a field of whiteness that affects and white bodies came mobilizing the universe, the combinations of seemingly infinite well to be savage or to be black, is to exist in the realm of the time and space, and the one I see evacuates into blackness from the question of health through the mentioning of institutional racism and passing at the question of what black people want, this discussion you want to have, then you should be held culpable for the frame of the one I see, turns your access to bow leg 17. Black lesbian feminist howler, how to learn the master tools will never know its master, the master's house for researchers to conduct health equity research, the man worth remembering. The subject learns how her was a feminist conscious and neglected the experience of woman at the intersections of race, sexuality, class, and age. Learns questions and answers have an implication for epistemology and methodology. What does it mean when the tools of a racist patriarchy are used to examine the fruits of that same patriarchy? The narratives, parameters of change are possible and allowable. Now the black material is constituted by an objective set of image to desire in relation or suited to slavery's breach of the womb, signified commodified forms of change that entrap her within the realm of femininity through a violence that exceeds the category black woman, exists in the rifle within the occlusion of the antagonism, producing the psychic breathing space and possibility of freedom foreclosed to her flesh. Thus, black female flesh exists in absence and facilitated through repression, depicting absolute negation within the black psyche. Traffic 2018 due to historically specific relations to power integrating black maternity is banished. We must examine the process of identification of the desire to black people here in the illumination of how the black mother is always said alright, always already a rifle for more than just the black child, the object of desire, gratuitous freedom from everyone, including one's black self. Solution of venture forces to extend the parameters of psychoanalytic inquiry to account for the syntactic particularities, social cultural impact of slavery and symbolic registers of black female flesh established through a state of breach, animating violence that precedes instinctual drive, which is the rapacity as a suture to the black woman has evolved, subjected to repression in the dark under the cross identification for black people is inseparable from me, an absence of black femininity of black materialist rivalry sees on and directed against her being the very negation of the fellows black fathers, loss of a me system, which black fathers, black sons, daughters, and non-binary chunk and adopt white scumbag pleasures. These pleasures are considered by the net as a repressed the banishment of black female flesh of black mothers, neither for close to the white other nor available in symbolic registers. The symbol vine constitutes her objective body and imako. This parasitic the objecting the mated upon blackness, right, large affecting black and intramural relations. Now the alternative a function of the negative operates on two levels. First, the alternative is refusal to properly reproduce the systems of power instrumentalized through the objection of black female flesh. Second is refusal, and the negative is a negative of presumption as the only ethical metric of analysis of the affirmative scholarly project. When you leave this room, black people will still be disproportionately incarcerated, and you get to leave. Gums closed, and she refused to reproduce property rules, fails, and marks. Something dangerous desire for specific difference. She refused to reproduce properly. Rules the mark of the internment, the mark of the criminality, mark of the terror. She refused to reproduce properly. Because it teaches something else. She refused to reproduce that goal. Threats to produce a radically different world, not they collapse. Captivity to a liberalization that circulates the way that value functions is self 2018. Slavery, which dimension of colonial tyrannic economic and should necessitate total balance for the extraction of total value, expropriation of the productive capacity for the conquered land, and enslaved bodies of with slavery is crucial because the most profitable effect of the choice of scientific reason which produces category of blackness is precisely the collisional relationship between the slave labor and the others of the start of juridic agreement does not belong in capitalist relations. Slavery allows for the expropriation of total value produced by chattel labor. Marxism involves any consideration of how labor is produced service surplus value as a blood nourishing capital. Price paid for a slave.
Are you ready for cross-sex?
I'm gonna put a break. I'm gonna drink some water. This is yours.
I have no idea who that is.
Oh, fuck that. Okay. Cross.
Yeah, 2. Okay.
Well, fill this up.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. The sharp evidence says that the violence against her is not contingent, it is gratuitous violence. What is the negative theorization of how gratuitous violence operates in the context of healthcare?
That's before you pull out your Wilderson block, right?
Yeah, no, I
think
understand
there
that, but
needs
I'm
to-
curious. Like,
Right, I know,
You
but
don't
I'm just prefacing before I respond.
Yeah.
I think that the way in which Sharp is contextualizing contingent versus, whatever the word that gratuitous, is that the ways in which we understand or relate to those intimacies. This is contextualized through Gums. It says the ways in which, yes, there can be larger ontologizing structures, the ways in which we understand that abstraction, but the ways in which the trajectories of change are applied onto the flesh and how we read that is one that is through the property relation of the fungibility of black female flesh. Jasmine, what does that mean? It means that we can go from slavery to land leasing to Reconstruction to Jim Crow to the Russian industrial complex, that structures can change and we can see positive things from that, but the way in which that entrenches black people to read that a certain way as productivity neglects the ways in which the excess traits of black people's labor, not as them not having value, but them exceeding that value, produces, moments outside of modernity to produce more forms of, commodity exchange, which is what our Gums 10 argument is about superfluidity, right? That it's not the labor or the commodity, but it's the process of laboring that becomes useful.
Just to clarify, what would be an example of this in the context of health insurance? The one AC is identified. Sorry?
What do you mean? What
Like-
example of what?
Like, what is an example of is there an example, like...
The
will
welfare
negative-
Of
queen.
gratuitous violence or images? Like, what is it? What are you
Right.
referring to? Example of what?
Of gratuitous violence.
Well,
Gratuitous violence? You want an example of gratuitous
No,
violence?
that's not...
Do you know what
that's not-
gratuitous violence
sorry,
means?
that's not what I'm asking. What I'm trying to ask, let me rephrase it, is the argument that the sharp evidence is making is that anti-blackness operates as a structure.
I mean,
You're not
sharp
responding
evidence
to what I
doesn't make
just-
that argument. Our argument is that there is difference within repetition, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the plan is a good idea. Our argument is that the ways in which the trajectories of the settlement are produced through captive flesh and the ways in which lands have been cleared for production are necessarily, we have to interrogate the ways in which those structures operate to determine the trajectory for the settlement, i.e. just because the land is in a process of becoming doesn't mean that a plan is a good idea or national health insurance is a good idea. It's not a reason for the permutation. It's a reason
Okay,
why
but-
the 1C theorization is a better way
So-
to understand how the world works.
So what is the argument then for why the implementation of national health insurance is a bad idea then?
Because I think we're making a fundamental claim that it does not destroy the property relation that our DeSilla evidence is talking about, right? That when I asked in cross-ex, why do Black Lives Matter, it was quite embarrassing that you don't have a response other than just all lives matter. The ways in which we get into circular logics of because of socioeconomic status that somehow leads to care doesn't make rational sense in the ways in which blackness destroys that relation and rather produces forms of pathology to sometimes justify care if you're being productive
It's
and
also
to take that care
indicative
away
that
when you're
you-
not being productive.
That you read evidence in the context of racial disparities but don't know how to answer that question is exactly our point.
We're gonna take a second for that. Right, it was sent.
Oh, yeah, me. Sorry. I was like, at least I said long. I was like, who the fuck is long? Are these things, like, what are, that's not helpful. This is being recorded? Is it a better question? Oh. I was just like, what's happening? I'm back.
Did I move it? Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
These are reasonable
No,
questions.
this is like,
I
I
mean,
moved it when we
yeah,
were moving
like,
it.
I assumed it would be asked before every debate.
Yeah, I was just like, oh.
Yeah, you actually have to replace it. Oh, fuck, that's fine, that's it. I was just overcome for the second ballot. It is not. Would be great. That would be awesome.
It's hot as fuck.
Yeah, I like turn the
I
heat on.
concur.
Would be awesome about it.
Thanks for coming back.
Okay.
No.
You know her, or are you just gonna do it?
Yeah.
1 second. I'm great.
disparate healthcare provisions, drug companies, profit manipulation, and Medicaid gaps. It's not reform. It's the biggest affront to corporate profit, insurance, and hegemonic neoliberalism in decades that saps corporate profit and gives the middle finger to neoliberalism. Healthcare disparities can't be explained by a single factor, but reigning in the system's commercial power is a complementary strategy for equitable resource distribution and prioritizing racialized policy. Their arguments in line of your all lives matter misunderstands the 1AC. They're right that we've identified a way that corporate profit manipulation can make reforms in healthcare. That is identifying a solution to a very multifaceted harm. That is to say, the harm exists for many different reasons, but we have identified one way in which reigning in corporate power can prevent those things from happening. You should prioritize mass biological death because it's intrinsically bad. It causes physical pain, suffering, and forecloses future value. If we win their groups of people who do want healthcare, it demonstrates the value inherent in our impact and turns the alt insofar as they expect to create some value, especially because the alternative to single-payer healthcare is just that pharmaceutical industry has control over the conversation, which leads to more commodification and fungibility. The role of the judge is to decide whether the AF is a good or a bad idea. One, is healthcare good? Bad debates happen best when we debate concrete policies because it allows us to jump into the specific details of each proposal and have the deepest conversations about each mechanism. The impact is topic education. It's the only thing unique year by year. Bowley contextualizes this argument to the AF. The combination of qualitative and quantitative research methods meld single-payer conversations towards the best mechanism for access. I'll answer their rereading of Bowley here. That's one line of the card that says that we should contextualize healthcare carefully. We agree. Different types of conversations, voices, and methods to counteract bad healthcare policy are important, but Bowley concludes that we have to combine quantitative research about the effects of bad policy with individual narratives as the best way to create multifaceted solutions to affect bad government policy. Our second impact to framework is clash. Weighing 1AC guarantees research is relevant and neg contradiction. Their arbitrary frameworks skirt engagement with the 1AC, which will hurt argumentative refinement. That's important because it's the only way we lead debate with the ability to debate and contradict one another. Fairness. If their framework is that you should obviate the 1AC for the sake of the neg's theory, that's bad because it means nothing we say will ever matter. Now, the alt debate. Permutation do the AF and refuse properly reproductive systems of power instrumentalized through objection of black female flesh. Permutation do the AF and refuse negative. Permutation do the AF and you can refuse the metric analysis of those affirmative scholarly projects, but also decide that the way we framed healthcare is a good idea because all of their links will just be about why the USFG is bad, not their specific policy proposal. Permutation do both. You shouldn't vote neg on presumption. The fact that the AF can't change structural anti-blackness isn't a reason to vote neg. It's a reason that we operate within imperfect systems, but we'll win that the AF is a better strategy to confront these structures. Neg on presumption links to all of our refusal offense because it makes contingent interaction impossible. Their first card is sharp. Our argument isn't that there's no structural anti-blackness or that the AF can fix it all, but it's also not all lives matter. The question of why do black lives matter isn't one that is answerable by a specific policy proposal because that is a multifaceted question that doesn't have a singular meaning. Yes, we agree. Black lives matter. All lives matter is fucked up. The entire point of the 1AC is that the way policies are implemented have been both racialized and affected by capitalism. The idea that controlling pharma profit is one way to address that solution is not the same thing as saying it affects every racial group the same way. Here's an example. Howell in 17, Republicans tried to fail 3 times to pass a healthcare bill to responsible affordable care. Our council completely independent. Black women who called the House for reduction. Black women face enormous and huge challenges. The ACA was a tremendous help. Obama said Medicaid meaning more people afford healthcare. The uninsured rate of 7% of black women testing the ACA could make the births cost prohibitive. Who those who benefited from expansions will be vulnerable. Black women likely to fall within that vulnerable population. We suffer disproportionate conditions involved by pre-existing. The black women's bodies are underfed beyond the scope of healthcare provision as racialized violence continues to brutalize our communities. Black women are taking charge of foreign activists. Black women must run for office and finance black women candidates who must change our voices from neighborhoods to the state legislatures to choose the halls of Congress. Their gums evidence is the opposite of the gums evidence doesn't describe the AF properly. It's the opposite of productivity. Pharmaceutical industry profit motive is linked to the infrastructure of racialization, which just demonstrates that absent the AF, there's worse control over institutions and individual bodies. Lee and 5 underlying this prediction of the race-free genomic areas is something that research on human genetic variation will be changed by dominant social ideas and values regarding what constitutes human difference. Little attention has been given to ways in which the bodies and bodily materialities are nonetheless racialized institutionally. Close questions need to fully understand how race can be produced and described into human DNA as opposed to being discovered in a research process. Statistics for years since the infrastructure of racialization emerged. The third is the pharmaceuticals industry, increasing interest in racially identified patient population, profitable market niches. These are research will practice and commercial development built in the infrastructure of racialization, whereby race becomes a central focus in the structure of meaningful differences among groups. The current trajectory may be one of race-based medicine, and our 1AC internal link evidence describes the process by which single payer would sap all profit from the pharmaceutical industry. There's sharp evidence. There's an affective pessimism DA. Their framework reduces ontological increase into how the world and systems operate into questions of only performance that mean nothing in the face of violence. Ranking 13 performance is a sensitive response that say nothing. The sensitive sure is not the nature of performance, the nature of violence. Violence is like a word for ways. Success has to be fully demonstrated. Some things race and affect are produced by violence. And violence exists as sort of a cultural expression. We're in the question of block. This is the auction block of the world. Effective change, but one is that which is not fully redeemable, understandable, legible, or visible. Black bodies are not matched. They're structurally positioned as that which is already saturated violent, meaning affect states to turn away from the potential for rupture, towards a more striking accusation that affect is structured by the very anti-violence that forecloses recuperative possibility performing identities. Their Gillen card. We agree state action is often bad, but disagree that every state action can be grouped under the same framework of irredeemability. accountability. Their theory of the world says that corporate control over the way that research happens is the same thing as research which is controlled by the government and not dictated by profit. That's bad because it means that drugs are always the same, that when drugs intervene in individual forms of community care, that's the same exact thing as when communities have autonomy over their own medical practices, which is our 1AC evidence. Quantitative progress matters. Here's an example. Until 17, there were no black and white women registered for poor gas and breast cancer mortality. As cancer became amenable to treatments, the death rate for white women began to plummet. The death rate for black women did not budge. For women, especially for black women, were not getting the same quality. These other thing to look at the disparity in that, but something here from women trying to navigate the fractured system of care. So you have a hodgepodge of hospitals and clinics with little communication, poor systems of care. Many of the women who I work with are afraid. Many of the clinics do not provide the best care. We validate the systems that serve are often inadequate. We need hospitals to work together to improve care. We hire community health workers who could direct women to high-quality hospitals. Progress has been made. The grassroots team pursued 160 providers, including every Chicago hospital, to share their data. The gap in Chicago narrowed by 35%. The reduction in black country in Chicago shows the mortality inequities caused by structural violence are often flexible, focusing deliberate work directed at equalizing healthcare systems and save lives. Racial disparity can be reduced and possibly eliminated. They're king evidence. You should read contingency rather than completeness. This is a denying feature. It flattens resistance and shouldn't be used as the sole explanatory category. This impact turns their refusal because even if the way we consider landscape is imperfect, the alt doesn't provide a process to tackle corporations which have already impacted this first gain 60 the pulsation of complexity. There does not answer the question of who should research what and why. Wolf's answer amounts to a division of academic labor in the chapter of appropriate barriers in the division runs the risk of echoing the segregative impacts of the imperial notions that exist. The stance may even lead us to doubt this political logic and serious promotional transformation is not coincident with the way that we are unable to explain the entire encounter between the indigenous and the settler race, the attachment identities, but ideas are capacity of being changed. An epistemological affective correspondence between subjectivity and settler whiteness and the accountability of power. We be conceiving no outside to colonial power, the oppression and domination are giving explanatory monopoly, the failure to take resistance seriously or to see subjects as sites of freedom. SET can defeat polarization as structurally inevitable. That framework is bad because it makes it inevitable while obscuring contingency in a variety of political approaches. McCune and Strauss in 13 is consequence for SET's contribution to rising political tension duration. SET can raise colonialism. SET struggle to narrate its own. SET can portray colonialism as inevitable. The risks across time, but also excuses of an action the present by building this action is fully determined. This challenge is not going to become a transform future fatalism cannot be deployed to apply an equivalence between the different forms of filler interaction with the indigenous people. And worse, it's aligned the legitimacy of indigenous resistance and every section. It's always already be colonizing. Individuals are excused from action and desire to be victims. It's useful those in a position of dominance because internalizing the assumption downplays accountability. I'm marking that piece of evidence at accountability. I already answered the Bode-like alternative thing above, but here's a defense of discussing how healthcare affects individuals. Contingent empathy is good. Gurn and 17. Trying to fully understand is not the same as actually achieving full understanding. Understanding among those on the margins happens all the time. Following the insights of black evidence, often those on the margins understand more than at the center. We are engaged in entangled empathetic moral attentions, working towards a complicated process of understanding. Usually, what we can get is just a glimpse. We never really know, but too many people use the idea that we can know as just an excuse to opt out of working out. I take this to be a failure of both the imagination and moral agencies. We are constituted by these relations. When some relations make it hard to see, and equal empathy will seem almost impossible. These relationships are part of us, means that we can and must work with them and try to change them. Their assumption of closed social systems and wrong is based on unfalsifiable productions. They'll say, oh, this card answers Wilderson. Yes, that's the intention of the article, but the point is that things are contingent and conflicting, which answers their theory that the way in which black bodies operate within healthcare is predetermined. Gordon 17, to the analysis were made at the point of white and black, the one with whom more clothes. Black is the absolute source of missing from this view that no human being is really any of these things. The thoughts of making people into one of such and people becoming such is another. Seeing one people as a false myth and no hoarding to acting about the system that has a force of such identities. Relational matter requires looking beyond blackness. It means moving from the conception of meaning as singular and semantical into the grammar of how meaning is produced. This emerges within the pessimist model. One thinks of the pessimism as the guiding principle. The critique would be that optimism and pessimism are symptomatic. They appear assertions and existing as contingent, not accidental. The social world at hand is a manifestation of choices because beings can only build the future instead of determining us. The task at hand is spanned and its author of argued dependence and commitment. One could be pessimistic. It's an act of forecasting. One could be optimistic about the same. What if there was no way to know? The point of some action is not the success or failure, but what we deem that worth doing. We have a piece of 1AC evidence that excellently describes the process by which increased access to care leads to better reporting on how people see care, i.e., before and after the ACA. There was a massive difference in how people viewed their own health care, but it's not always measurable. Gillette Pearson 17, black substance experience health care, discrimination on 2 levels, anti-blackness and anti-demo, academia lacks evidence and shows that sacred health concerns for black men less data from the Affordable Care Act benefits when black sons do it does, and highlighting the issues among black men easy to decipher without health care performance and laws in place. The community's well-being will continue to be a risk. These questions are extremely important to black men without access to health care services and need. The ACA is improved quality for Americans.
Hold on. What card did you just read?
It's under A.T. Dillon. It's the second card. It's Gillette Pierce. Sorry, I jumped up.
No, nothing. Let me do it. Okay.
That's one question.
But I'm not gonna get to it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I have one question before I start my kind of preparation. So does the plan text of the 1AC lead to healthcare for all?
No, we don't think fiat is real.
No, that's not the question. Who does it cover?
Right.
All is the question.
Right.
Yeah, it's universal.
What piece of evidence can I look at that says that it's universal, as in, like, would it go to prisoners?
Well, yeah, because it's everyone in the United States gets healthcare after the act.
Everyone in the United States gets health care after the affirmative.
Yeah.
Okay. I actually want to talk a little bit about that. What characterizes the United States?
I mean, in the context of the AF, I think it means
a geographical understanding of the United States. It's not perfect, but it's the one that the United States federal government uses to form healthcare policy.
My question is about reservations, right, and the ways in which there are different political statuses for people of color, for example, natives, right, and the ways in which they are constructed as dependent domestic nations, right? Do they get covered by the plan?
I think that the AF would fund healthcare for anyone and everyone who wants it, so yes.
LOL. How do you know that black and brown people want healthcare?
I don't know that all black and brown people want healthcare.
What does care look like under the F? You say that we get control over, we get autonomy
Over
and
our
control
communities.
over our medical choices of our communities.
So two things. One is I don't think it's possible to describe what care looks like for everyone because obviously
Does that
doctor-patient
include things like
relationships are
ceremony?
different.
Do I get
I
to
think-
smoke peyote? Do they give me peyote for free? Do I get copal?
Do you
Like
want to?
What evidence?
No,
like,
things like the evidence standard exist where they standardize responses to
can I-
sickness and all of those things. I want to know what single payer does
Yeah.
for in specific ways that
Yeah.
people need autonomy over their health practices.
Right, so I think one good answer to this question is in our 1AC evidence, which speaks to the way in which the pharmaceutical industry has traditionally been able to circumvent attempts at communities to dictate their own care when it is not traditionally perceived to fall under what the medical...
evidence
So they're gonna
Nice.
build. So
That
they're
says-
gonna build
Yeah, I
like
can tell you.
they're gonna let us do water ceremony.
right. I want the
things,
card that you think
They're gonna
says
build
this.
us
Yeah,
that.
for sure. I'm gonna get the author.
The
I'm just
money's
pulling up the
gonna
1AC.
cover that.
Right.
I wanna.
It's the shift card.
The shift card.
Yep.
Shift card. Cool. What is contingency?
I think in the context of the way we've argued in this debate, contingency is the idea that violence can't be explained by a singular phenomenon.
What is a singular phenomenon, and how does that interact with the way
One
in which you're?
explanation of how.
I haven't finished the question.
Sorry.
In the context of your BOLIG evidence, that talks about intersectional frames as as determined by Black feminist scholarship.
Yeah.
What is intersectionality, and what is multiple frames? Are those the same
So
thing?
I think the way that Boleg talks about the intersection of different forms of research is that individual
No.
perspective.
What is intersectionality? She's talking, and this person is writing in the context of Audre Lorde and Black feminist
Right, and
theorizations
Boleg-
of the way race, class, and gender
Yes.
intersect. Yeah, I know. You don't have answers. It's okay.
I'll
I
take
can answer if you want.
I'll take about 30 seconds of prep. So if you want to stay, So the order is going to be framework first. I'll make sure what I'll do is just like framework, ontology, kind of header type shit. All right.
I'm not ready. Where's my phone?
All right. Is everyone prepared and good? Excellent. Am I? Yeah, I am. Interpretation of the actions of the manifest implied as atmospheric model and research are one prerequisite the debates around the exact pulse implementation are based in specific political theories and ontological orientations to social ordering, and so debating is necessary prior. Liberal humanists intellectual hegemony turns their education standard because debates become less about challenging cognition and foreclosing opportunities for differential perspective. This means that you have to prove that your research model is preferable before evaluating its success. This checks back their Boleg evidence because the Lord includes the ways in which we understand intersectional forms of power as always being particularized, which is problematic because it obfuscates the larger social narrative that is parasitic to the ways in which our bodies are used, and rather is a referendum the ways in which the 1AC's plan does not meet the level of that presumption, which means you can vote negative here now. Fairness, the app should be held the burden of defending its benefit success for epistemology, and it is fair because the affirmative would have necessarily have research those things in order to make their claims. Their deferrals. White escapism. Note 3 is real world. The app has privatized the knowledge production, their interpretation, and reproduces substantive of the state as proxies for state legitimacy without grappling with that. There's no direct relationship between feet on end and change in real world dialogue. Most of us will not become policymakers who will export certain ideological presumptions to the world. They lead to a bad training model because it says that the 1AC as they plan takes us in a vacuum will be effectuated without grappling with its grounding its theories in real world implications. The impact of cognitive dissonance. We access the internally supportable skills better, focusing on epistemic research. Model impacts how we relate with material structure than individuals now. 3 is our framework arguments means that they only get the F via their solvency. Evidence that they have to win that it will produce epistemic shift through its action, not the potentiality of it, because those transcendental notions are produced through the fungibility of blackness. That's our terror evidence which produces the reflection of the ways in which we're able to antagonize the structure through the kind of mutilated position of the flesh. Now, 4 is the plain text that does not access the cultural training because it does not mandate cultural. 1 does not mandate cultural training, but also none of their evidence contextualizes what those conversations would look like, which I think cross-sex becomes very confusing when I ask how does socioeconomic status have anything to do with the remediation of care? There's no good response to this one, which you should have to tell me at the end of the debate. What is the oscillation of the ways in which blackness antagonizes the ways in which socioeconomic status is read writ large means that there's always a precarious position, which contingency would relegate affect as a response to the ways in which we're able to respond to blackness, because it says that it allows for the product relationship to check the ways in which that reaction is justified. Now, ontology. Extend from the top of one that sickness has self type in the body and its mass and in the narrative of gratuity and the deposit nothingness on the slave shaping is the mediation of the flesh. Slavery marks the effect of the captive body from its motor will, its active desire, a body that was literally shaped by the captor's irresistible drive to consume us, and Sharp says called to being the derivative position of the flesh means that the captor may be able to create different relationships to black bodies but can never reclaim the narrative because its very existence wasn't designed through an annihilation of black subjectivity. This should check up with true value of the debate because health access cannot be understood as a contingent act against folks as a form of reprieve, but rather a process which within a dialectic between the fungible codes of power that override the foreclosure of the excess trace of black female flesh in opposition to a blackened state of foreclosure. I find my ontology framing that I went the direction of the blank wall and terminal solvency of the permutation. Also, form should contextualize the ways in which you understand the ontology debate too, because it's not necessary that we have to create some superior phenomena, but rather what does the 1AC performatively lead to? We said the ways in which you assume a relationship to blackness through the antagonizing of the 1AC to produce an image of affect through the uses of the specters of black bodies in relation to the negative is problematic because you did not ask to put my business out of the ways in which you're able to produce a affectual attachment to that shit, because it allows for types of slippages to interrogate the ways in which black intracommunal forms of care are sexy commodities for us to exchange in a liberal economy. Now, this means that they link to the coordinate it's more not the negative, because the way through which they synthesize death gaps and disparate impacts is rely on flat and linguistic determination, locking in black bodies into markers of grammar. Think what does it mean to add non-discriminatory laws to healthcare? What does it mean to change to radically lead to a transition in ways in which pharmaceutical companies are able to profit off of the health insurance? My answer to that is it's not radical at all, which is what supercharges our Dylan Evans. Go to the link page here. The Dylan shit. Extend the Dylan evidence that the ass progressive narrative assumes a liberal notion of time as a possibly outside of violence, mystifying the ways in which libidinal investments of captivity over determining a possibility of creating a future that is not already concealed and codified by the state to entrap blackness. Is that there's a difference between society moving forward and progressing versus maintaining a society that can exist in the future. Now, choose a productivity link. The matter of insurance eliminates the medical conflict between the slave's health and his master's economic interest and his soundness. Is the question when I ask, why do black lives matter? All of their evidence will conclude in the ways in which blackness produces in the context of blackness being productive for the economic plantation, which is not able to be responded to in cross-section. I think they should be held to, because Natalie, if your training model is so great and you are able to create effective attachments to black people, that's what you can produce in cross-section. Probably seem like other ways in which you understand black people. Also, those forms of care are always antagonizing. I was always antagonizing the ways in which we're able to funnel the plan text. Now, the productivity link also means that I think there's a double bind that either one, you do produce healthcare access to all, and that's problematic because the ways in which prisoners are literally in a legal contribution to the nature of captivity, i.e. that they are the warriors, or they are the threats against the state, which means the ways in which you make that shit healthy or produce more prejudicial complex, more instead of it means that you do not change the relation out into criminality, but rather use laws to create that foreclosure more in depth. Now that line by line shit. Permutation shit. We're on to all this. Yeah. Here is the framing for the alternative, they have said that you should understand access as care. This is emblematic of every time the 2AC slash the 1AR and the 2AR will say it is fucked up to deny black women care is the impact of the alternative, but they have missed our distinction. We are not a rejection of care, but a rejection of insurance. This is one first, this fucked up own performative pathology because it represents a forced choice of legal recognition for me to acknowledge love and care to black people, and two, the judge should not be deciding care or no care because the insurance does not get you there. They will say ask care, although that the called that the F is a radical trajectory toward empathetic care, but if black people are already producing those modes of relation in the status quo, I don't know what forms of codes of legal recognition are able to spill up into a national monarchy. I think that your public evidence concludes the negative that it never does, because it's always asking the question of other valences of explanation and theorization that can come to the level of coherency to the law, which means that all of your evidence in the context of black women particularly being affected by laws is not going to matter, because that's the ways in which we use it's our response to that shit that creates a national narrative of success and equality and progressive narratives that are always outside of black women, because you can say that we were able to help you, but help you insofar as to produce you as always incoherent and slipping outside of complete captivity, called the distinction complete captivity, because you're always able to slip outside and have some form of humanity that we're able to articulate ourselves as in relation to, which is how problematic, because it means that we're always in a trace of the ways in which modernity is able to suture that antagonism, which means all the permutations rely on the fungible tropes of black women's labor to produce that moniker. Hold Natalie to discussions of her performative register. Hold her fucking partner. I'm sorry, I don't really know your names. The ways in which it produces trajectories of the state to produce subsidies. You have privatized labor away from the black woman, because you should understand I'm going to prescribe you with some fucking illnesses now. Allie, you probably have diarrhea. Alex, you're gonna have heartburn. Sean, no, I'm so sorry. Patrick, hurtful. You got a toothache. Justin, you got a cold. You got the flu. The F is a form of Thailand to the ways in which cultural training models are able to remediate that, because if you do not change the mode or role of care and the ways in which the property relation antagonizes the move to always remunicate its ethical attachments to blackness, means the ways in which black people are viewing this affirmative, this bitch, we don't trust you. We don't fucking think that you care about black people. But you can use care as literally a commodity and exchange a word that should mean something. The one NC or the alternative is a refusal to adopt that moniker, because we think that it's always instrumental in the ways of the labor that we always have to fucking give it to, always fucking look crazy when we refuse that shit, because it says that we are now culpable for producing the problems of the state, because we did not include ourselves. Bitch, we weren't already included in the first place, and there is no death framing that will ever come to the level of gratuity, because it says the ways in which you always push yourself away to criminalize our form of the most productive moment of our subjectivity, because we say fuck that shit, we were good without you.
We're gonna take a second to prep.
Yeah, you are.
how the alternative interacts with the racialized system of medicine that you've identified.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it about the alternative that, or I guess how does the alternative confront that system?
I think I have two responses. I think that you can see this in the 2AC about the ways in which there is autonomy within communities to produce forms of care. So I don't think that care is in the question. And then is, do we care about insurance being the obstructor of that? And I think my response is no, because I don't think that the AF, I don't think that the AF erases this occlusion, but rather is through the property relation of productive citizenship, because the question then becomes, if Black Lives Matter, for what and to produce what?
So
and I think
my
I've sufficiently
question-
responded to that question.
But my question is there a difference between existence of insurance and non-existence of insurance?
Can I be real? I don't think that Black people owe anybody in this room a conversation for what intramurally our lives mean to one another. I think that your call in to want me to tell you that is emblematic for why all your AFEC claims of contingency are problematic because it's consumptory. Two, I think that in relation to what this means in terms of national health insurance is that we have a fatalistic claim, right, to the productive notions of our pathology, which is then optimistic. Oh my gosh,
So how
words.
is it-
But I think that is what our presumption ballot then means, because that's the Gunston evidence about the excess traits of value over-coding pathology of not being written out.
So then in the context of, non-Black people, white people
I don't care.
engaging in national health insurance, or say a pharmaceutical company who aims to take advantage of the type of community care you've said is important, what is their role in the conversation about reducing those incentives? Is there none?
Right, can I just, because the 2AC and now these cross-ex answers are kind of flip-floppy. I think that you've conceded that the AF doesn't actually happen. I think a lot of the 2NC presses have been to the ways in which form determine the way in which we understand or relate to Black people.
Right. And
What
so
I'm saying is that white people after the 1AC don't give a shit. So why are we producing shit that produces the same antagonisms between people?
So your argument is that no white people will ever give a shit about giving
I don't
health
think
care
you
to
do.
Black people. You
I don't think really
do.
the panel does writ large, which is why we have a kind of referendum on how value is produced and how you should not affirm that value assignment, because it's won through the commodity of care.
Yeah.
I think that made that clear in 2NC.
How is it that we, or the judges collectively, can determine that no white people care about Black people receiving health insurance?
I think I gave the judge a reflective moment. Y'all all have an illness, and if you think that the 1AC's Tylenol, from the perspective of Black people, Jasmine, you're giving us Black agency? No. But if you think that it changes the antagonism, then I guess, but you have conceded that particularities are not able to resolve that shit, and that we should focus on the outcome, but you cannot answer the response. I mean, you're hurt, I know, but I don't care.
I'm actually fine, but thank you.
Okay, there we go. It comes out.
My water bottle cap, I just dropped it all the way over here.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Is it in the Dropbox?
You're gonna flow me under Jasmine.
Where is it?
I just
I'm waiting for it to show up.
Oh wait, no. I need to go back to this. Oh, I might not be connected. Just look at it later.
Okay, so long as it's saving.
Yeah. Everybody good?
You can't impact turn futurity. A timeline looks like a period when you consider genocide. Their intent of corporation, the righteous down below of gratuity of violence against native people. There is no reparation, nothing that can erase genocide. The core 500 years of ongoing colonization, the affirmative renders native specters to their administration of health and creation of healthy bodies because it speaks. Genocide is a noun, not as a verb. What makes life better? Can the good life be built on bones of entire tribes? Gratuity means being able to say that settlers cut natives down to a motherfucking fourth of the population British Choctaw ways will be punished. The logic of savagery is deeply embedded in medicalization, which is a logic that's perfected on black people in captivity and native peoples. There's genocide to structure the state, and then is applied broadly to the population. Plenty of anti-factors have a stigma, and one couple was just investigated for the child dying. Now, what is autonomy? I think we have to have the ability to refuse. Native and black people have cosmologies that the plan forecloses. Peyote ceremonies are still criminalized underneath the FDA drug schedule in the world of the plan, and they expand our assimilation to unnatural medicine. Our argument is that the world is always moving around us, but the ultimate radical act is to say, fuck that noise, because black and native people aren't asking for medication, they are asking for life itself, for care. That is the slippage between articulating the F as Black Lives Matter when you cannot decipher a grievance or attempt to compartmentalize the violence that our communities experience away from a structural claim. That always need to be like, yeah, Black Lives Matter and others too, is the moment at which their theory is opened up to the devaluation of black people because they love the way that symbols for black people operate as selfish or wanting to talk about themselves and how they've experienced over 500 years of repetitive violence. Now, the symbolic register should also influence how you understand cultural competency or the intimate relation in the examination room. Culture is constructed through symbols. The way that black women have higher pain tolerances, that is an image is intimately tied to the way they are mothers, and the way, because even though she is in poverty and struggling, her working hard to survive is indicative of her strength. This is a level where the patient meets the doctor and produces the reaction. It's why cops are called for fake injuries. Injuries are being a nuisance in the operating room, or why Tylenol is prescribed for broken legs. You're trying, or you last year crying about Nick being mean to you in finals, because Natalie is indicative of the way that white people feel when they encounter black culture. We're controlling the trajectory of the way in which the settlement uses linear narratives to project itself into the future through extrapolation of productive capacity of black women. There should be no doubt in your mind that the world is anti-black and the future is writing itself through the present. King says that settlement is about the making and unmaking of bodies. Native black people are made into dead and non-being in order to elevate white bodies to humanity. This manifests materially through clearing of natives and black captivity that uses commodified labor to reproduce and legitimize the settlement. The 1AC spectacularizes an instance of archaic violence and racial death graphs in which they take a snapshot of time and spends hence all the examples that they point to in order to legitimize the F. This mystifies the quotidian nature of anti-blackness through its isolation against an ongoing project of making of the settlement. When you hear solvency, you should be hearing rooting in order to launch. Is what King articulates as a part of the infinite permutations and effects that become possible through the spatial and temporal capacity, or what Wilderson calls cartographic coherency. All this stuff at the top about reservations and land. The 1AC not only fails to deconstruct the power of those who control what the settlement becomes, but at the moment at which the racial death gap closes, the settlement becomes the strangle pasture with a log cabin or other idyllic and romanticized constructions of the landscape that conceals anti-red and anti-black violence, which produce the encounter in the fucking first place. Our terrific evidence is specific to the ways in which this operates for black people who want to participate in their theorization, in the ways in which they misread Audre Lorde, in the ways in which she's theorizing intersectionality not as multiple systems of oppression, but the ways in which those all can be found at the site of the black woman's flesh who is in poverty. All of those things convene at the flesh. Now this is not specific to the mechanisms of the after healthcare or insurance, but it's important structuring claim for how you filter the rest of this, especially the solvency debate as how possibilities of eradication or replication of the settlement happen. They attempt to shrink down the act to a small instance of providing black people what they asked for, what Stevie Wonder calls living just enough for the city, giving people the bare fucking minimum in order to pacify them and demand more out of them. Now, the last arguments I'm going to make are in response to the so-called answers to King and the 2AC. I think the dependency as a political status for natives means that this is always just an uneven power relationship in the ways in which the tribal trust relationship has never been entered since the treaties were written. I think Standing Rock is an example of that, how they can try to create treaties, but they can still violate our bodies and our lands, and how these are always, like, even though they are written, they are facades, right, or facades, lol. But that the ultimate moment of autonomy is the ability to have the power to refuse that. I don't think there's an articulation in the 2AC of what refusal looks like for the affirmative, or what, their role is in relationship to that. They cannot capture our refusal. Our refusal is a refusal of them and their project, and the way in which you all are always trying to impose your realities on our bodies.
Are y'all saying prep? What do you have?
We have 5:34.
Vote F for single-payer healthcare because it saves millions of lives. The pharma industry has a built-in profit motive facilitated by government policy that makes bad care inevitable. Single-payer guarantees basic treatment, life-saving preventative services, financial access, improved doctor-patient relationships, and community autonomy in medicine. Biological death matters. It causes interim suffering, is unethical, and it's a disparate distribution and forecloses future value, which means it turns the alternative insofar as it attempts to create some form of ethics, which is intrinsic to the idea that you should vote negative to begin with. Tackling the pharmaceutical industry is the only way to confront the racialization and accumulation of black life, because it is impossible to conceive of solutions like the alternative without basic health care. The pharmaceutical industry guarantees continuation of racialized violence. Racialized care violently intervenes to preempt community solutions to social health disparities, and guarantees long-term continuation of every structural issue they've identified. Reject every block argument about individual commodification, because nothing about our theory excludes specific people. It forwards a theory of how healthcare operates, which is not what any of their evidence is about. The framework debate, permutation, both frameworks, it solves their education and advocacy office. Our interpretation is you should evaluate why the app is a good or a bad idea, and that we have fiat, because it's the only way to talk about implantation. First method of it is healthcare research. Uniqueness goes affirmative because healthcare research is over-focused on theory and ignores the quantitative measures necessary and able to improve care. Melding theory and practice is the best way to confront hegemonic institutions, because it gives us the tools to recognize the best institutional change, refine our arguments, and see weaknesses in how the market currently works. The impact is healthcare literacy and practice. Conditions conclusions about how the system operates are the best way to guide our interactions with institutions, because we can find the best points of contestation and sites for change. This doesn't misread Audre Lorde. The app doesn't forward that a single theory for understanding of what is proper. Two, you should also consider the 1AC. First is class. Running the 1AC guarantees that our research is relevant. The negative contradicts it. That's the only way we can have contradictory arguments that move to any conclusion at all, because people will respond to one of those arguments based on good evidence and preparation. It makes all of our arguments and skills better, because debates are well informed. B, someone is fairness. Arbitrarily getting rid of the 1AC means the negative always wins, because they're in their frameworks that confirm their offense. There's no link to their education. Bad arguments. We don't become the systems we research. The value evidence says that we should understand particularized power, because but that is consistent with particular social evidence. There's no negative presumption argument. The plan of 1AC defends that national health insurance is a good idea. If we win that, we should win the debate. The app doesn't legitimize the state. It provides a strategy for approaching institutions. The app is a justification for a plan, not just a plan. Permutation do both. Refusal and national health insurance operate on different levels. One is individual and the other is institutional. The ontology/theory debate. Don't vote neg for personal refusal, because it's not compatible. It's not incompatible with the 1AC. Nothing about the app forces an individual to take part in one system of health insurance, but the fact that everyone doesn't want the plan is a terrible metric for deciding its value, because it's impossible to weigh the tangible consequences of the pharma industry. Contingent empathy is good. Bonds of solidarity build relations that challenge oppression. The alternative is white people refusing to discuss oppression, which makes it impossible to challenge it, and is a strategy that is commodified by the alt-right as an excuse to disengage from issues like the pharmaceutical industry, while they receive millions of dollars in kickbacks from cheap racialized drugs. If we run a risk that institutions and social interactions are contingent, you cannot vote negative, because it means they actively deny value. For those who disagree with their understanding of institutions, there are thousands of years of human history, and their theory takes a small part and misapplies it. That's the Gordon evidence. Blackness is not absolute, because social systems are not closed. A priori assertions ignore the fact that contingent interactions, individuals, circumstances, and personal differences all determine human beings. Blackness one's constructed, which means that it can also be deconstructed. Their predictions are unfalsifiable, because they're built on foregone conclusions about how people operate, which is a bad way to predict behavior, because it uses theory to overdetermine practice. This is especially true in the context of healthcare. Our Tribetti evidence says that the EC has meaningfully increased people's perception of healthcare. Their performing arguments doesn't antagonize blackness. It describes the state of healthcare as a research method, not individuals. Two, everyone whose scholarship we read was already published, and through our Gruen evidence impact turns out the absence of empathy means that we never consider blackness. There's an affective pessimism. D8, their ontological inquiry only operates at the level of theory and can't respond in the face of violence. The move to ontology and affect at the expense of praxis is parasitic on the grammar of suffering, because it's one-dimensional, over-theorizes power at the expense of responding to violence. Or healthcare good often proves this argument. They can explain certain historical systems, but don't account for a vast group of black people who do want healthcare. The link debate, the Dylan evidence, the app doesn't link to it. It doesn't say I see time as linear in absolute sense. The proximity arguments, the one you see, is not only economic. Our evidence and app is not all lives matter. It's also the exact opposite of productivity. The idea that the app needs to answer why Black Lives Matter is bad and links to all of our commodification arguments it means that we have to have a perfect commodification of blackness and BLM to win the debate. The absolute opposite of denying coverage Davis and Duvier. The difficult question is how to establish a balance between force that safeguard the lives of prisoners and strategies. Designed to promote effectual abolition. I do not think that there's a straight of line. It would be utterly absurd for a radical person activist to refuse to support demand for better healthcare and inside value state. Now, the predictions of reforms to make the prison a more viable institution. The insurance bad argument is an app argument. Insurance is not a forced choice. After the app, people can choose whether or not they want to go to the hospital for free. In the world of the alternative, profit pharma, and insurance decides for you. We haven't taken labor from black women. We presented scholarship as a justification for insurance profit. They link to all of this offense because all their arguments are a justification for voting for a negative ballot. Nothing about the app prescribes an individual with culpability or criminality. We shouldn't put personal character or affect because scholarship presented in a debate. That one, it turns their commodification arguments because it makes ballot a referendum on individuals. Two, it's a slippery slope to voting for X debate or bad, which is more violent and only pushes individual individual experience into the spectrum of fungibility. The futurity debate, inability to erase history, is not a reason not to recognize that there is a difference in the world with and without healthcare. Our 2EC evidence says that recognizing land as a referendum on whether policy works is worse because it's an excuse to ignore delegitimized populations and continue the colonization of land over people, over which people do not have ownership. Individual autonomy and choice to refuse is not a response to national healthcare. Refusal is a personal decision, not a contradiction with how national health insurance operates. Speaking to genocide is not incompatible with that healthcare of the app. Or when you see evidence impact turns their community care arguments, the pharma industry intervenes in community care that prevents individual strategy of care to punish without westernized medicine. Other drug policy is bad is not a reason to vote negative. It's a reason to deal with the pharma industry, and is also just a link to the status quo. Black people should be able to talk about themselves with modifying that for a ballot links to our offense. It shouldn't be a competitive metric for victory. This is also proven by our Ansel and our Howell evidence, which indicate that there are vast groups of people that want health insurance. So the idea of denying those movements is necessarily unethical. Our examples do not mystify anti-blackness. Howell's a great example because she says that despite institutional anti-blackness, the only way to move forward is with health insurance. 7% more black women given access to health care post-ACA.
All right, we have 9:46. last minute to kind of stare at things and put things in perspective. Okay, is everyone 2, 3, 4, 5? Okay. Yeah, the top. I tried figuring it out for you, I couldn't. Hey, we're good? Cool. Excellent. Which part? Sorry.
What it was on.
Sorry, I was like moving it. Okay, sorry, I was like,
Move it.
All right, we're back. You cannot read Audre Lorde without knowing the personal, political, black, and native people outcomes, ways that inform how we care for each other and ourselves. One of our examples of peyote ceremonies or anti-vaccination stances that are criminalized through the binary construction of science and anti-science that proves that savages are always anti-science. This proves the link between our theory and the symbolic literature and the ways that those things are materialized. That means that when expansion of insurance happens, we don't have to force us to go either we will die or either we will do it because we have internalized those symbols of ourselves and alienated us from our ways, or we won't go and we will get thrown in jail for using the traditional ways of one of our children dies. This is a casual link between how projects of autonomy are intimately tied to personal refusal, the way that captivity and clearing holds our bodies are repeated, always transitioning but never to the question of can we actually choose holds our bodies in suspension. That means that because they project a settlement, they spectacularize the death into a logic of disparity that when the gap closes, you think that things have not gotten better. It's a concealment of violence. So the top of the two in, or middle, or really the top of the one of the two in are asked the question if they say that they save millions of lives. My question is save them for what and for the notion of productivity. There's no response in the lineage of the ways in which the trunks of productive citizenship is producing the monikers of health and exchange in the first place. It's not collapse the property relation or that the distilled evidence is talking about, which means that the ways in which the Himmelstein evidence, which I think is part of a circular logic of care meeting socioeconomic status, does not make any sense because it requires a form of legal recognition to produce the moniker of value in exchange. Remember at the bottom of the 2 and C where I talk about the ways in which linguistic forms of care are commodities of exchange that we should always reaching for in order to be coherent to produce affectual attachment to the ways in which our bodies come into one another and understand the ways in which we have a right to care. Right, there's no response to that in the 20R, which means you should hold the line here because the way in which the alternative is able to refuse the project of insurance go. There you can see the distinction that I make in the 2 and C for the reasons why the alternative is not a rejection of care, but a rejection of insurance for the ways in which the conceded productivity set falls black people into, which means that the ways in which we understand intramural forms of communal care is not relegated to the affirmative, rather is only obstructed by the affirmative, which is why you can vote negative on presumption because it says that we conceal that shit from you do not have the agency or the access or even the permission to have that shit. Remember when I said the 2 and C, Natalie, that you don't get to invoke the ways in which the codes of power that are placed onto black women produce the ways in which you can antagonize against black women. What was the response to that? Nothing, which means the ways in which you understand form and the question of the framework debate is going to be the ways in which we understand ontological order on the level of relationality, the ways in which bodies meet each other. They say that health insurance discussion solves this. No, it doesn't, because the ways in which the Boeing evidence cites Audre Lorde when she says that intersectional forms of oppression are particularized through the monikers of larger obstructions of the law that can never always foreclose the potential of the black female agency, which we think is conclusive with our guns evidence, with the criminality of exchange, which your Gordon evidence is not responsive to, because you can see that when we turn Gordon back on you because of the ways in which you flatten experience down to the level of coherency to the law, we see that there are excess traces of value that precede and exceed that, and we contextualize the ways in which modernity is final, which means that the world in which you expand the 1AC, you expand, settle that. Remember when Taylor goes that you build a good life on the backs of bones, and all of your ways in which you understand the monikers of success and exchange are all through the genociding or erasure of native bodies to produce a kind of effect way for them to produce an effecality of your stance. The answer was yes, never think there's a good question. I forgot what I gave y'all, but I think that the 1AC is a kind of title it all the way with the ways in which black people are looking at this shit. We don't fucking trust you, which is one reason for why the alternative stuff is a good, because it says that you no longer put the labor on black people to produce the moment of exchange to say that we should relate to that antagonism because we think it's parasitic to the intra-communal forms of life and the value and exchange that we think are integral to the capacity and care that the 1AC is not able to access. Hold them down to the plain text. No response this no one here for why your Himmelstein evidence and your whatever solvency card. It's a lot of white people, maybe some black people too, but the antagonism toward the relation of property or socioeconomic status being the reason for why care is administered in bad ways does not answer the ways in which we are antagonizing how disparate impacts only reproduce a narrative of coherency to legal recognition that does not antagonize the ways in which property relation is outside of blackness to produce a sutured effect of affect, which is only through the ways in which black male flesh is producing that exchange. Yeah. Which then means that the permutation, oh, LOL, I forgot there really was an articulation of one the one here for the reason why you're able to solve a refusal, which means you only go on the backs of a black woman to produce the coherence, the ways in which you're able to funnel our labor. That's our exact response, which means your idea of the Andrea Davis evidence, LOL, can we all have a moment there that says that we can have healthy prisoners and that's okay, but you do not take the criminal trace away, so you only reintroduce the Persian industrial complex as being a justified stance toward affect, which means that you, which one means that you don't solve for healthcare in the sense of care, which the alt would solve for, but also two means the ways that you produce a reason to throw more racialized black bodies into the system. Think of Oklahoma with a fucking black man was thrown out of a hospital because of the ways in which he was supposed to have lying or being poverty or poorish. What does the app do about that? Throws him in the jail and gives you some health insurance and puts a stamp of approval on that. This is why we don't fucking trust you. The reason for why you should default our presumption, and let me have this moment because presumption for y'all means something different for me. Presumption means that the one to see is only possible through the labor of black women, that we refuse that shit because that produces a metric evaluation which answers all your ballot shit, because we agree that you do not have a role in that the ways in which you call upon black women to act necessitates that, and a refusal to be a part of the project is what the 1AC facilitates.
death cap saps corporate profit and regulates the insurance company out of existence. This is a concrete and certain strategy for reducing material violence. It disproportionately affects racialized violence. Biological death matters because it forecloses future value in the afferent suffering that's harder to define, like pharma companies intervening in communities to circumvent their choices over how to provide their own care. The app is productive insofar as it sees better forms of community care, but so is the alternative because it proves that there is some inherent value in voting neg, i.e. they want a ballot to continue debating the tournament. They want community care to continue some form of intrinsic value. In the world of the alternative, you're voting neg to refuse engaging in the only solution that would stop a pharma company from entering a poor racialized community, selling a drug that's more harmful than helpful, and leaving communities to suffer. The only instance of fungibility and the accumulation of black people, and in particular black women, happens in a world without universal care, which intensifies all of the neg impacts because the only intervention in the schema of racial neoliberalism is the app. We cannot conceive of solutions to their harms without access to fundamental health care, which is a foundational point, not only about debate, but any political strategy that has to do with health. That's a reason the app is good and an advantage to our theory of power, which is fundamentally material, contingent, and predicated on the ethics of healthcare being a fundamental right. Don't vote neg for a strategy of individual refusal. The implication of this has for the debate space links to all of their offense because it forecloses conversations about the structural trends that dictate health insurance. Anytime an individual chooses to opt out of the conversation using the federal government does not put labor on black people, but pharma control does because it intervenes directly in communities, which are when I see evidence that describes how they take advantage of racialized bodies for profit and forces communities to find their own care, pathologizes their inability to find drugs, and so on. The last two in our argument is essentially don't vote AF because they use black scholarship or a government that's anti-black. That's a dangerous metric of considering healthcare. Let's walk through it. One, in the context of their argument about how debate commodifies everything, it links a great deal because their entire link is that institutions will consume scholarship poorly, but the AF links less because it precludes attacking the institutions themselves, and the alt says that because those spaces we're operating within are imperfect, we should ignore them. Second is that's literally the logic of the pharmaceutical industry and healthcare policy. They prioritize the solution to an individual problem over a contingent institutional reading of how public care operates. That's the 1AR argument about how asking for the ballot links by claiming to reject commodification of individual experience and simultaneously operating within that same space. Their strategy only serves to reject examples like our Howell and Ansel evidence, which describe very concrete differences in a world with or without care. Howell is especially excellent about this. She describes that despite the fact that violence is racialized and will exist after healthcare is still valuable because it allows for individuals to better challenge those instances of violence and places that violence outside of its worst forms. Third is that impact turns their offense because it's so responsive to this notion of this notion that we can never make contingent improvements. Let's walk through the implications of their theory for healthcare policy. One is no white people can discuss the racial implications of healthcare access. Two is no white doctors advocate proposals for hospitals to create more racially sensitive care. No white people in the pharma industry can advocate changes to the racialization of medicine. You can think through their alternatives simply in the context of the 1AC advantage, which is that absent government intervention, pharma control is much, much worse and impedes on forms of community care, which just demonstrates that absent our ability to engage in conversations about structural institutions, all of their impacts are one, inevitable, but two, much worse than absent the F. We don't force anyone to engage in our strategy of institutional reform, but individual strategies of refusal are not mutually exclusive with the 1AC because they do not disprove that NHI should happen, which was a sort of permutation argument in the 1AR that you can both recognize the value of this strategy on an institutional level and individual commodification, since we've impacted on their arguments about how individual recognition isn't enough of a reason to vote F. They've conceded our framework, which is you get to weigh the F. Their only answer is that you don't just get to weigh the plan, but what we've justified the plan with is part of the F. We read a piece of evidence that says that healthcare research matters. Uniqueness goes neg because it's over-focused on theory, but melding it with practice matters because we can see the weaknesses and how the market currently operates, which allows us points of contingency to challenge the worst interventions of healthcare policy, which answers the top of the two in our insert of examples they give about criminalization and internalizing certain ways that the insurance industry operates, because we've read evidence about how all of those things are worse in the instance where pharma has total control over the industry. It forces that same form of internalization, and absent confrontation, it guarantees the status will only deteriorate. So we have to be able to talk about harms in a sort of statistical sense, otherwise it's impossible to have conversations about how different policies affect different bodies in disparate ways. This is impacted by our 2AC evidence that says that if we don't focus on contingency and create some form of empathy, it's only a ruse for conservatives to deny helping the most poorly affected populations. Legal recognition doesn't create bad care. Howell impact turns this argument and says it has to be brought into a legal sphere. In some instances, the alternative can't create care outside of the realm of insurance because insurance insurance still exists, but the AF creates a choice for that form of hospital care. I answered their other refusal arguments above. Now, lastly is the theory. You shouldn't vote neg because their theory is inadequate. Our Gordon evidence says that everything is contingent and it's not possible to describe every institutional interaction with a single system, which demonstrates that their arguments about how we necessarily attempt to build a good life are wrong. I disagree with their characterization of both the Angela Davis evidence and the Audre Lorde evidence. Our evidence says that Audre Lorde can be read in contingency with the ways in which we have the possibility to justify quantitative research, and what the Angela Davis evidence says is that strategies to increase access to healthcare can be consistent with things like getting rid of the prison industrial complex, i.e. can be a radical strategy, not simply an incremental one. They have not answered our affective pessimism DA, which turns their exchange arguments because the ontological injury only operates at the level of theory, which proves it can't respond to the face of violence, especially in a sort of neoliberal sense, because they don't have the possibility to contextualize the way that healthcare institutions operate beyond individual refusal, which just pushes the public sphere and getting rid of pharma to the wayside.